Harvest Moon: Friends of Mineral Town is one of my favorite games of all time. It was the third Harvest Moon game I had ever played, only preceded by Back to Nature and A Wonderful Life. This raises a question of today's video. How is the remake? Does it hold up to that old classic that I so fondly remember? How is the game itself? Today, I'll be discussing that and more. This is Story of Seasons: Friends of Mineral Town. I want to preface this by saying I will draw comparisons to the original, as the game is a remake of a port of Back to Nature, and it'd be difficult for me to not do that, yet I do wish for someone who hasn't played any of the other games to come away knowing more about this game as well. Though, this is going to be heavily focused on my personal journey through the game, and I will do a lot of comparisons. Another quick note is that I may make slight mistakes because I get Back to Nature and Friends of Mineral Town slightly mixed up from time to time because I've played both of them so much and they're so similar. I want to start off quite simply for some of you out there that are wondering, if I liked Friends of Mineral Town on the Game Boy Advance, will I like this game? And my answer is going to be yes, and there is many reasons that I would say that I like this one better thanks to a lot of the quality of life improvements that they've added. However, I also do not feel like it completely replaces the original because the original had some charm that didn't quite make it over to the remake. I want to note that right off the bat, I noticed that the title screen used a different song than Friends of Mineral Town, which was kind of disappointing because I was actually looking forward to hearing the remade version of that song. As it turns out, the song is in the game, it's just in a different spot. It actually made me somewhat worried, but my worries were soon quelled by the rest of the game's new soundtrack and presentation. The introduction sequence is spot on and seems to take elements of all the versions of the original. You spend time at your grandfather's farm as a child, sometimes referred to as just an old man in some versions, which is a translation error. While you're visiting your grandfather's farm, you make a new friend. Eventually, though, you have to go home. And then one day, even farther away, the grandfather dies and the farm is left to you. You leave your life in the city and move to Mineral Town. The mayor gives you a brief welcome and even allows you to end the game early by asking you if you actually want to do this, which was actually a feature of more Friends of Mineral Town. Off to a good start, I'd say. One of my favorite things about this game, and the older games, is how quickly you can get started once you're on the farm. Once you are on the farm, you're basically free to do whatever you want from this point on, and nothing is holding you back but the crushing reality of capitalism. You start off dirt poor, but the satisfaction you feel as you slowly build up your farm is something else. If you played the original game, one of the first things you're going to notice is not only did they change how the characters looked, but they gave their portraits an entirely new style. Many of them look fine, some of them look weird and others might look slightly better, though I would say some characters were given unforgivable style changes. It took some getting used to, but after playing for a while, I didn't really mind anymore. While I'm talking about the villagers, I also want to point out that some of them had their names changed, most likely to make them closer to their names in the Japanese version. It is possible that Natsume made up some of the names for localization and Xe decided to do something different. Anne became Ran, One became Huang, Barley became Mugi. All the harvest sprites are now named after food except for two of them for some reason. Those things aren't really that important in the grand scheme of things, and once you get used to it, it doesn't really matter anymore. But now that we can farm, how is it? Well, you can walk on your crops now, which is a major improvement. Gone are the days of not being able to water the center crop without the help of the harvest sprites. Now, that center crop has nowhere to run, and you can decide to pluck it from the earth. The game has taken on a chibi art style, and is trying to be as cute as possible, while also replicating the Game Boy style, and I'd say they did a pretty good job of doing both. Everything is colorful as it should be, so far, so good. I want to spend some time bouncing back and forth between the pros and cons, just to keep things interesting. First of all, the menus are reworked and seems to show most of the same information as the original, and now even includes a relationship level with each one of the villagers, which is a big plus. This is very reminiscent of Stardew Valley. In fact, I have a feeling that someone at Marvelous took a nice long look at Stardew Valley because a lot of the quality of life fixes and improvements directly mirror Stardew. It's actually quite interesting that an indie game inspired by a series is then the inspiration for the original series it was inspired by. For instance, you can now see the relationship hearts on one screen, as mentioned before. You now have a toolbar with all of your items in a row. You can now see the area effect of your tools so you can easily see what's going to happen. You now have an end of the day summary showing what you sold of each item type in an organized fashion. Heck, you even have an inventory trash can so you can dispose of your unwanted items, just like in Stardew Valley. All of these are welcome changes, and I'm glad they implemented them, though I doubt they just so happen to do all these things without seeing Stardew and going, wow, we should do that. In the remake, you can now also buy items in bulk, which is an amazing addition to the game. Previously, you had to buy every item one at a time, except for, say, fodder, chicken feed, and seeds. Now everything can be bought all at once. The inventory now stacks items, whereas before you started out only being able to carry 2 items, upgradable to 8. Now you can stack multiples of any items in the same slot, making inventory management a thing of the past, or a breeze. To combat the overpowered nature of being able to buy 99 flowers at once, they changed it so you only can give 1 gift per person per day. Which, it also tells you who you've given gifts to, which is a nice touch. Unfortunately, as far as I know, Friendship Decay still exists, and does not lock at 10 hearts like Stardew Valley does, which makes me sad because that will prevent me from just powering through the years to get to year 50 to get to Mountain Cottage when I'm done with everything else, because everybody's friendship will drop. The rucksack, though much larger now, can still be upgraded to add more rows, allowing you to carry an impressive number of items at once, so you have a lot less trips to the chest. Along with the addition of the trash can, you can no longer throw your items in the ground and lose them forever, so no more throwing and missing the shipping box or throwing the flower on the counter after purchasing it, or throwing it while trying to give it to a harvest sprite that's running 80 miles an hour. Since I'm talking about the harvest sprites, it'd be nice to use it as a segue to talk about them some more. Parts of the harvest sprites have been streamlined to make everything better. When you hire a harvest sprite, they will clarify what you want them to do, which is useful, but there's also a feature that when they're working, you can tell them to stop the next day. This is a good way of canceling sprites you no longer need if you wanted to switch them to doing something else, for instance. The harvest sprites have minigames that make them better at their jobs, but unfortunately it makes you go through a ton of dialogue every time you want to do it, and that can get quite annoying after a while, especially if you're playing the minigame with multiple sprites per day playing the same minigame. A skip button would have done wonders to make things go more smoothly. Also, the sprites do not use makers, so if you want to maximize profit, you're going to have to do that stuff yourself. However, there is a great update. The makers now process your entire stack of items at once. This makes using the makers much better and worthwhile. It's one of my favorite parts that they added to the remake. Since I brought up animals, I wanted to mosey over to that topic. The animals are much better here than they were before, and the game has done what I think they should have done for a long time. There is now a bell on the outside of the barn and the chicken coop that you can ring to instantly move all your animals inside and outside of the barn, much like how there is a bell in A Wonderful Life, but also for your chickens. This changes everything, as now I actually want to let my animals outside because it's so easy. It's much better than the old method of pushing each animal outside slowly one at a time. This also allows the harvest sprites to take care of them faster since they're already fed. For chickens, you just need to let them outside, but for livestock, you need to feed them grass. Sadly, this is one of my biggest gripes about the game. They changed grass to be like Stardew Valley, and while I love it in Stardew Valley, here it just feels wrong. Instead of planting grass in a neat and organized way, you plant them and they spread out like weeds. They just don't grow in one spot. Not only do I personally find this ugly, I just find it annoying to cut, because cutting big sections actually slows down the growth, since you're better off cutting every other square so that they can regrow faster. I ended up just making a section of my farm grass and just letting it go wild, but I'm not happy about it. You used to be able to use grass to make weedless paths around your farm and make everything look really nice, and now it just looks like a mess. It works the same, and it's not a huge deal, but it's probably my least favorite change that they've made to the game. Although there is another change that really bothers me, I find it much worse, which is the fact that animals are now capped at 5 hearts at the start of the game. Previously, you could take care of an animal and get it all the way up to 10 hearts, but here, you can only go up to 5. That is, until you breed the animals. Each generation that you breed will give them 1 extra heart, and you'll need to breed each of them multiple times to get them up to 10 hearts. I have yet to get anything but chickens up to 10 since the livestock takes so much longer to give birth, and there's more variations of them which all need the same treatment. I would have preferred if they just gave newborn animals a massive affection boost from the start, or like a multiplier to make them like you faster to make it more worthwhile to breed. I felt like this is just a way to make a previously useless feature basically required. Other than that, I really like everything else they did with the animals. They seem to make it a lot easier to take care of them now than ever. They even added more livestock than the original had, such as strawberry fruit and chocolate cows, all of which need to be bred separately. I still think it's an overall win, being able to take the animals inside and outside instantly, and the makers doing everything at once. I do dislike griping about games I like so much, but it's always a good thing to address the good and the bad. One thing that's quite cool, in fact, is that your horse can now be ridden off your farm, meaning it actually has a use now. In the original, the horse was stuck on the farm, so your fastest mode of travel was restricted to just your field. This is a change that I'm really excited for. Sadly, my horse is taken away from me because I didn't whistle to it at all. You see, you get a horse from Moogie, and if you take good enough care of the horse, you get to keep it. This requires you to brush and talk to your horse every day. Well, I learned the third thing to raise affection, which is to whistle to it until it comes to you. I seem to have missed the memo. That, combined with a few missed days of brushing and talking, was just enough to make Moogie decide that I don't get a horse. However, you do get the horse back the next year. There's another major change to the horse where the horse no longer has a shipping bin on it, but I feel like that's a worthy trade-off since you can already stack all your items. You don't really need the shipping bin anymore, and the horse can go off the field, which is so much better. That's about it for animals. One last thing I'd like to note is that chickens now have their own pen. Corn gives you more food per unit, making it actually worthwhile, and you no longer can pick up the chickens, which makes me kind of sad. It's time to move on to the next topic, upgrades. This time around, the upgrades have made a return, along with some new ones we didn't have before. You can now upgrade your field to make the soil quality better. This is useful now because crops now have varying qualities in the remake, where previously it was not a thing. I don't mind this much because it does give you milestones and a pathway for greater profit. It also gives you more things to spend your money on, which was an issue with the late game of the original. All of the tool upgrades have returned all the way up to Mythic. This time around they are much easier to obtain thanks to the extremely huge inventory that allows you to carry an insane amount of recovery items. This allows you to easily dive deep into the depths of the mine. This change may actually make it not essentially require save scumming to get the items you want, but it's still highly encouraged because it's more efficient. You see, using 2 save slots in the original, even with the 8 slots with the best item in the game, you still had to use the save trick. It requires it because the mine was far too deep and there was no way you'd have enough swings to reach the bottom. There was also dead ends that would mess you up. When you enter a floor, all the ores are the same, and the stairs are always in the same spot, which means you could enter a floor, save, find the stairs, reload, go straight to the stairs, and save yourself a ton of energy. It was actually quite possible that while looking for the stairs, you could use almost all of your energy on one floor, let alone 255. Now, you may ask, why do you need 2 save slots to do this trick? It's because in the original, you would have to save before you go down the stairs and after. This would allow you to reset the next floor by reloading the previous floor and going down the stairs, which would give you a new floor. This was also super needed because you might not have the item you want on the next floor at all, even if you dug up the whole thing, and it could be a dead end at level 120 and you'd have to start over again. The main issue is that not only could that happen, but the cursed tools and other rare items only appear on specific floors and only sometimes. So if you want to go all the way down and it wasn't there, you'd have to do it over again. In the original game, it was a huge chore to get these items. But once again, it's time for me to announce another new addition to the game. They took another quality of life idea from Stardew Valley and went ahead and put in an elevator. However, it only moves you 50 floors at a time, but that would save you a lot in the long run when you have to make repeated trips. To get the elevator, you have to first give the Harvest Goddess enough gifts to unlock it, so it's a reward for doing a task in the game, which I'm a fan of overall. Also, I didn't want to just go through that again since I did that in the Game Boy Advance version, and man, was that a grind. Overall, mining is a pleasant experience and I enjoy it. The farming in this game is as good as ever, even better now that you can walk on crops. Instead of one tree, you now have multiple trees, all having different fruits and different things for each season. It's a nice touch. At this point, I'm just going to rapid fire a few more things that I haven't touched on, but I can't really find a good way to segue into them. One of them is being that the television is slow and clunky and I don't bother with it anymore. Previously, you just hit a button on the directional pad to change a channel, but now you have to navigate a menu and it's far too slow. You have to wait for Van to get a pet, and you cannot get him right away, meaning you don't start the game with a pet, and I didn't even have one in my first year, because Van's kind of hard to get a hold of. Van has an assortment of pets, but Van rarely shows up, and it's easy for you to forget Van's in town. You can also have multiple pets, but you have to make sure your current pet likes you enough before he'll give you another one, which is fine, I guess. I hate to unload all the negatives at the end, but I do have 2 final critiques. I like that the tools are easily switchable, but it's quite slow to switch between them, which is kind of a nitpick. The final thing I'd like to say is that some of the sound effects are really subpar. I don't know what it is about them, but I don't love them. I did eventually get used to them, but I don't know, there's just something about it just doesn't feel right. The music in this game is lovely, and while I still like the previous 2 games versions more, the songs did pretty well, but I definitely like them less than the originals. I spent a lot of time drawing comparisons between the 2 games, but aside from those things I've mentioned so far on both sides of the fence, the game is rock solid. It has a solid foundation and a nice progression curve. I love the way you can absurdly upgrade the tools, and I adore the way that they implemented it. It's rewarding to expand all of your farm buildings and make your farm more and more efficient. Your progression along with the harvest sprites getting better and better really makes you feel like you're constantly improving in what you can do. This game is definitely more for someone who likes having a big field and a lot of work to do over character interactions. Though there is a lot of cutscenes and characters, I do feel like the farming is the main focus of the game. Several of the 3DS games watered down the amount of work you have to do to give you more time to spend talking to the villagers and doing requests. This game doesn't have a request system or a huge overarching narrative, so this one's more about you running your farm the best you can and to make it thrive. There are friendships made along the way, but the focus isn't that much on the story, though there is a lot to the characters. Personally, I love it, because to me the best feeling is upgrading my tools and finally breaking that boulder that's been in my way so I can plant more seeds, or being able to plant those seeds because my new watering can will allow me to get more done. You can still befriend all the villagers, watch cutscenes, and get married and have a baby, but you won't be doing anything else drastically around the town, like revitalizing it or building new buildings. There are a ton of secret upgrades and stuff, but most of them come from mining. There's a whole slew of amazing goodies in the mine for those who are willing to plunge the depths. This one is definitely gameplay over story. Oh, and the remakes added 2 new characters to marry, Brandon and Jennifer. They're fine. I don't really have anything about them to say, I just really don't care. In summary, Story of Seasons Friends Mineral Town improves a lot of the aspects of the game and definitely modernizes it for the current generation. However, it's not without its faults in some areas, and many of the flaws have been boiled down to nitpicking and just nostalgia bias, which I know I have. I do think this game is worth playing though, and I don't see myself going back to the old game. This one has a lot of good things going for it that just makes it easier to play. This has been a retrospective of Story of Seasons Friends Mineral Town. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.